Let's say somebody's driving to work tomorrow morning and your song comes on. They listen for 3 minutes, then they move on with their day. Pretty simple, right? Somebody listened to your song, you got a stream, maybe you even got paid. End of story. At least that's what I always thought. But recently I discovered that while that person was driving to work, a whole bunch of things are happening behind the scenes that most artists never see. Money starts moving, different people might be getting paid, and that immediately raised a question for me. What exactly is happening during those 3 minutes? Because if dollars are being generated from that stream, I want to know where they're coming from. And more importantly, I want to know if they're going to me. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the 4 questions that I'm now asking about every song that I release. Because if I can't answer those 4 questions, I don't actually know if all my music money is finding me. So I started digging. The first thing I discovered was surprisingly simple. A stream isn't the payout. It's the first domino. Somebody presses play, and a bunch of things start happening that they never even see. That may sound obvious, but for years, I thought about streams like they were the finish line. Suddenly, I started seeing them like the starting line, and that led to a question I couldn't answer. If one person listens to one song one time, what exactly is being paid for? Then I started thinking about Hurt. 9 Inch Nails recorded Hurt. Years later, Johnny Cash recorded Hurt. Same song, different recording. And suddenly, something clicked in me. If somebody streams Johnny Cash's version, should Trent Reznor still get paid? And of course he should. He wrote the song. I mean, otherwise nobody would want to write songs, right? Should Johnny Cash's recording generate money? Well, of course. That's the recording the listener actually listened to and pressed play for. And that was one of the first real wait a minute moments for me, because suddenly I realized that when somebody presses play, the industry isn't looking at just one thing, it's looking at least 2 things. You have the song, and then you have the recording. That was the moment everything started getting easier. Not because I understood royalties, but because I finally had a mental model. For years, I thought every stream created just one pile of money. Then I realized that pile splits almost immediately. Part of it cares who wrote the song, part of it cares who owns the recording, and that's when I started thinking about song dollars and recording dollars. And at that point, I had a new concern. If dollars were missing, which dollars were they? Song dollars, recording dollars, or both? And I can pretty much guarantee I wasn't losing sleep over that question 5 minutes earlier. Then I stumbled onto something that had confused me for years, which is mechanical royalties. I'd heard that phrase forever, I never understood it, and then I found myself asking, if Trent Reznor wrote Hurt, how does he get paid every time people keep listening to it? Johnny Cash recorded his own version. Millions of people have heard that recording. Why should Trent stop getting paid just because someone else recorded the song? Well, he shouldn't. And that's when mechanical royalties finally started making sense to me. They're one of the ways that songwriters get paid when their songs continue being used. And I remember thinking, seriously, that's all it means? For years, I had built it up into something way more complicated, but at its core, it's just song dollars. And that immediately made me wonder, if I didn't know what mechanical royalties were, how long had I been ignoring them? Then another question hit me. What if nobody buys Hurt? What if nobody downloads it? What if they just keep hearing it on the radio, on the TV, in a restaurant, in a coffee shop, maybe in a live venue? Trent Reznor still wrote the song, so should the songwriter get paid when the song is being publicly performed? And of course it should. And that's when performance royalties finally started making sense to me. They're one of the ways songwriters get paid when their song keeps getting performed out in the world. And this is where things started getting annoying, because I'd been hearing BMI and ASCAP for years, and you probably have too. Yet I never stopped to ask what problem they were actually solving. At this point, song dollars finally made sense, and I turned my attention to recording dollars. And I found myself wondering something else. If Trent gets paid because he wrote Hurt, what exactly is Johnny getting paid for? Let's pretend that nobody ever streamed Trent's recording. They streamed Johnny's recording, his voice, his performance, his version. Trent gets paid for the song. Johnny gets paid for the recording. Different contribution, different dollars. That's what master royalties are all about. And that was the moment where the whole thing changed even more for me, because now I wasn't just confused anymore, I was actually uncomfortable. If there are song dollars and recording dollars and different royalties attached to each one, then getting paid once doesn't necessarily tell me the whole story. I mean, I could look at a royalty report, I could see money coming in, and still have no idea whether other dollars were still missing. And that's the part that got under my skin. Then I came across a term I'd never even heard before, neighboring rights. Just like when I finally felt like I understood what recording dollars meant, that's when I started remembering Pandora and Sirius XM and even radio broadcasts in other countries. And I remember thinking, how did Johnny and Trent get paid for these? And that's when I learned that recordings can generate money in places I wasn't even thinking about before. We're still talking about recording dollars. It's just another way those recording dollars can be generated. And honestly, I don't want to spend years avoiding a term that turns out to be pretty simple. Then I started thinking about all the places I hear music that have nothing to do with Spotify. Movies, TV shows, commercials, video games. Let's say you're watching Netflix and Johnny Cash's version of Hurt starts playing. Well, now what? Trent wrote the song. Johnny recorded the song. Netflix is using the music. So who gets paid? And who gets to even say yes in the first place? Well, that's sync. And honestly, this was probably the easiest one for me to understand. Because the moment that I pictured Hurt showing up in a Netflix series, the important questions became obvious. Who owns the song? Who owns the recording? And who really has the authority to say yes? By this point, I wasn't really trying to learn royalty terminology anymore. I was just trying to answer one simple question. If dollars are being generated by my music, how do those dollars find me? And somehow the system has to know that I wrote the song, I own the recording, and that's when the acronyms started showing up. BMI, ASCAP, the MLC, SoundExchange. And I remember thinking how many of these things are there? But eventually, another thing clicked for me. These organizations weren't all trying to do the same job. They weren't creating new dollars. They're just helping dollars find the right people. And I started picturing dollars floating around with no mailing address, Songwriter unknown, recording owner unknown. The dollar existed. The question was just whether they knew where to go, which, again, it sounds obvious until you realize that dollars can only find you if the system knows that you exist. That raised one last uncomfortable question. How does the system know I exist everywhere it's supposed to? And one by one, those acronyms started falling into place. Not because I'd become an expert or anything, because I finally understood the problem that they were solving. What if I've only been looking at the dollars that are reaching me without ever thinking about the dollars that aren't? And that thought bothered me a lot because I've been releasing music for so many years. I've uploaded all these songs. I've watched the streams come in. I've looked at royalty reports, and suddenly I realized something. What if there are artists out there collecting dollars that I'm not, simply because they understood the system better than I do? Not because they're more talented, not because they're bigger or more famous or more successful. It's just that they know something that I don't. And the uncomfortable part is that they might not be doing anything special, They may just have checked a few boxes that I didn't even know existed. And honestly, that idea pissed me off. So I stopped asking, what is publishing, What is a mechanical royalty? What is neighboring rights? And I started asking a much better question. If somebody streams my song tomorrow, who's supposed to get paid? And somewhere in the middle of all this research, I realized that I didn't actually need to memorize the royalty system. I just needed a way to check whether I was covered. That's when I started writing down questions. Not royalty questions, coverage questions. 4 of them. And these are the same 4 questions I'm now asking about every song that I release. Question number 1 is, have I actually created the opportunity for these dollars to even exist? Because before we talk about royalties, before we talk about registration, before we talk about collection, well, somebody has to be able to press play for my song, right? And if people can't find and stream your music, none of these dollars ever gets generated. I've made so many videos comparing music distributors, so if you're still trying to figure out where to release your music, you should start there. But no streams equals no dollars. Question number 2 then, are my song dollars being collected? Remember, song dollars include things like mechanical royalties and performance royalties. If you wrote the song, make sure the songwriting side knows you exist. And that means looking into things like your PRO, whether it's BMI or ASCAP or whatever applies where you live. And it also means understanding the MLC if you're dealing with US mechanical royalties. The action step is simple. Don't just write the song, but register the song. Because writing a song and registering a song are 2 completely different things. Question number 3 then, are my recording dollars being collected? Master royalties, neighboring rights. If you own your recording, make sure the recording side knows where to send the money to. Your distributor may handle some of this, but not necessarily everything. And that's where SoundExchange kind of started getting my attention, So the action step is, don't assume your distributor equals full coverage. Check who's collecting your recording dollars. not who should be collecting them. Question number 4, let's say a game studio wants to use one of your songs and pay you for it. Could you actually give them an answer? I mean, maybe it's a game studio, maybe it's a Netflix series, it could be a movie trailer, or maybe even a commercial. Whatever it is, they're going to need to know who can approve the use of your music. Would you know who controls the song? Would you know who controls the recording? Would you know who actually has the authority to say yes? The action step here is super simple. Pick one of your songs and just ask, do you know who controls the song? Do you know who controls the recording? Do you know who can approve its use? Because if somebody reaches out tomorrow, those are the questions that they're going to ask. Because here's the thing. The artist I'm worried about isn't the artist that's getting 0 streams. At least that artist knows that they have a problem. The artist I'm worried about is the one that is getting streams, the one seeing money coming in, the one looking at the royalty reports and assuming everything is working. Because that was me. Maybe everything is working for you, and I hope that it is. But if somebody asked you right now, who's collecting your song dollars? Who's collecting your recording dollars? Are you covered for mechanical royalties, performance royalties, master royalties, neighboring rights, and sync? Would you actually know? And when I started down this rabbit hole, I wanted to know where the dollars were coming from. More importantly, I wanted to know if they were going to me. And honestly, I still don't know everything, but I know a lot more than I did when I first started. And more importantly, I finally know which questions to ask. Now, I'm curious about something. Which of the 4 questions caught you off guard? Was it song dollars, recording dollars, neighboring rights, sync? Let me know in the comments, because tomorrow morning, somebody might press play on your song. 3 minutes later, they're going to move on with their day. But behind those 3 minutes, dollars may start moving. Some connected to the song, some connected to the recording. Imagine 5 envelopes with your name on them. Song dollars, recording dollars, mechanical royalties, neighboring rights, maybe even a sync opportunity someday. The uncomfortable question isn't whether those envelopes exist. It's whether they're all being delivered. And the question isn't just whether dollars are being generated. The question is, do you know where they're supposed to go? Because if you don't know where those dollars are supposed to go, how would you ever know if some of them never arrived? And that's the question I wish I'd asked years ago.